Welcome to the Journey Podcast, where we share some of the most inspiring stories on the planet, life lessons, and tools that will help you navigate through your own personal journey. On this episode, you will find a segment from our weekly life coaching platform, the Dream Nation Breakfast Club. Feel free to tune in live on Zoom every Tuesday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern via dnbreakfastclub.com. I am your host, Josh Valentine. I'm excited to talk about emotional intelligence. Last week, we spoke about childhood trauma and how it affects your everyday life. A lot of people reached out to me afterwards, just saying how it gave them a better understanding of themselves. And I've been very fascinated with just understanding how trauma manifests in your health and how it affects you later on with your ability to cope with your emotions. I actually had a segment on NBC TV station talking about how trauma manifests itself into illness and it affects the immune system. And you can't talk about trauma without talking about emotional intelligence. And the idea of EQ over IQ has been an idea that has hit the world by storm. So there was a book called Emotional Intelligence. You guys can look it up. There's also an Emotional Intelligence 2.0. I read through both of them and they were very valuable at the time with just understanding how your emotions affects your everyday life, how it affects you in the marketplace, how it affects your leadership, all of those different things. And I feel that one of the reasons why, if not one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people don't get ahead in life, it's because of their emotional intelligence. You may have a lot of IQ. You may have gotten through school with flying colors. You may have gotten the 4.0 or you probably aced your SAT or whatever examination, whatever bar examination. And the thing about IQ is what you can quantify. You can't quantify EQ. And this is a big reason why it hasn't really hit the world in the same way that IQ is valued. And it's unfortunate that in most schools, EQ just isn't taught. Emotional intelligence. Think about it. With your school, right? How often did your school teach you about emotional intelligence? It teaches you how to critically think and perhaps, you know, the War of 1812 or trigonometry or a cumulus cloud, all of these different things. But think about how important your ability to cope with your emotions are in the workplace. Think about it. And the reason why this is even so much more pressing during this time in humanity is because a lot of artificial intelligence is starting to take over the mundane jobs that humans were doing that required IQ. So if you were doing a job with computers or numbers or analytical thinking, you're not going to outthink AI. It's just not going to happen. And the world is starting to lean more towards team building and community centered business practices. And your work is going to be centered a lot more around your ability to effectively communicate with people and your ability to navigate through your emotions. And unfortunately, think about just your life in general. Think about the times where you've gotten yourself in the most trouble. Isn't it true that throughout your life, the majority of your problems have come from your ability to deal with your emotions at that specific moment? I know for me, anytime I've gotten myself into trouble, it has been just maybe perhaps an emotional outburst or an inability to properly deal with my emotions or deal with people. And if you can learn how to take back your control and how to have better emotional intelligence, it's just naturally going to help you a lot more in the marketplace. It's going to make you more valuable in the marketplace, and it's just going to help you be a more effective leader. Okay. Now, unfortunately, we live in a world where a lot of leaders don't have really high IQ. Any of you work for someone? Drop a number two in the comment thread if you work for someone. Maybe you have a boss or a manager or a supervisor that doesn't have very high EQ. Drop a two. If you have someone that you possibly work for and they are apparently a leader, more of a manager or a micromanager, because if you're really a leader, then you know how to properly work with people. But how many of you have a boss, leader, supervisor, manager that just has very low EQ? Now, think about how painful it can be to work for someone like that or to work with someone like that. It is daunting. It is just every day. Think about your mood going into work. Many times, your mood going into work is dependent on who you're working with and the people. Think about the quality of your overall working experience. You will spend a third of your life working. About 8 hours a day is spent working. So many of you heard me say a third of your life is spent on your mattress, sleeping or laying down. And the other third is spent literally working. Some of you, it's a lot more than 8 hours a day. So it's essential to find a working environment that has leaders and managers and teammates who have very high EQ. And for those of you who have children, it is of the utmost importance to always nurture that child's EQ, to take some time to help that child cope with their emotions. Some children are a little bit emotional than others. I have one of my boys who's a little bit more on the emotional side. And one of the things that we do with him is help him understand his emotions, help him better articulate what he's even experiencing. Do you know that a lot of inmates, if you look up the research on inmates, many of them end up incarcerated because they have such a limited vocabulary that they don't know how to articulate or properly express what it is that they're feeling. Think about that. Think about how many people in your life, right? Or just people out there in the world. Imagine feeling something that you don't even know how to describe. You don't even know how to express. And you just build it up. You don't even know how to properly vent your emotions. You never develop the tools to properly deal with your emotions. And this gets built up as energy blocks in your body that manifest themselves into chronic illnesses and ailments and dis-ease over time. So it's absolutely important to just make sure that you learn how to properly cope with your emotions. And one of the best ways is to just learn how emotions work. And I'm going to go into a lot of that today. Really excited. All right. We are going to get into emotional intelligence and specifically the 5 emotional intelligence mastery skills. Okay. So here we go. The very first one, when it comes to emotional intelligence mastery skills, these are the 5 that you absolutely have to master in order for you to cultivate a greater sense of emotional intelligence. Number 1 is self awareness. And take notes. Take notes as if you're going to have to teach this later on to someone else. It may be your child, it may be one of your peers, but take notes. Again, the weakest ink is stronger than the strongest memory. History makers are note takers. So, self awareness, number 1, knowing one's emotional impact on others, knowing that your vocabulary and words matter and create impact on moods, attitudes, and emotions for you, your team, and your clients. So, so important. So, I always say having social awareness, cultural awareness, but most importantly, self awareness. And you'd be amazed by how many people just do not have any self awareness whatsoever. And even just having cultural awareness, knowing what to say and when to say it. There's just so many people that don't have this part of their brain exercised. It's not nurtured. It's just dormant. And this is going to affect you in a major way, especially when it comes to your leadership. So when it comes to your vocabulary and words specifically, it's so important to just always be sure that you're using words that are absolutely valuable to you. So I wanted to share a snippet from this book that I often go back to. It's called Giant Steps. And this is a really, really great share when it comes to just language. Negative emotional intensity can be lowered through the use of modifiers and softeners. In addition to substituting annoyed for angry, why not try some of these phrases? I'm getting a bit peeved. I'm feeling a touch out of sorts. I'm beginning to get just a smidge cranky. Well, now isn't that a tad inconvenient? So again, it's the language that you use. There's three things that determine your emotional state at any point in time. And I actually learned this from my studies in neurolinguistic programming. And those three things are referred to as the emotion triad. And that is your body or physiology. So, what your body is saying at that point in time, that's going to affect, like I mentioned earlier, your quality of thinking, your focus. So, what you are focusing on at any point in time is also going to affect your thinking. Think about it. Whenever you're depressed, whenever you're sad, whenever you're going through any negative emotion that you're going through, chances are you're thinking about negative things. You're thinking about things that have lack, have scarcity, that bring fear to you or anxiety or make you overwhelmed. So it's so important to just always channel your focus and put your focus on things that fill your spirit in a sense. And then last but not least is language. So the meaning you give to any specific situation, your language is everything. So how do you communicate with your children? Often we don't realize the impact our words have upon them. Instead of blurting out, "You are so clumsy," or "Why can't you be quiet?" Remarks that can powerfully undermine a child's sense of self worth. Try using humor to break his or her pattern. For example, you could say, "If you continue on this track, I might start getting a smidge cranky," with a smiling face. Say something that changes not only your child's focus, but yours as well to pave the way for more appropriate communication and behavior. Then follow up with a suggestion such as, "Honey, if you do this differently, I think you'll get what you really want." So really, really great shares. And these are coming from day 165 and 166 for those of you who have the book, Giant Steps by Anthony Robbins. So really great shares. And again, it goes back to the idea of language. It's so important to be mindful of that because think about it. For those of you who've ever been hungry, right? If you're hungry, sometimes people will use dramatic language to amplify the emotion. So rather than saying, "Hey, I'm a bit hungry," they'll say, "I'm starving." Anybody guilty of that? Saying, "Oh, I'm just starving." Or instead of saying, "Yeah, I'm a bit sleepy," you're saying, "I'm exhausted." Or instead of saying, let's just say, "I'm having a difficult time right now," you're saying, "Man, I'm just struggling right now." And those words amplify the emotion because it's dictating the meaning that you're giving to that specific situation. So never say something about yourself or your situation that you don't want to be true. So self awareness. Remember, self awareness is the first step to healing. Next up, number two on mastery skills of emotional intelligence is self regulation. Self regulation, super important. controlling and redirecting disruptive impulses and moods for your team. So, one of the things that I do in my household actually is, for example, yesterday I started playing some kid music to start my kids off for homeschooling. They usually start their homeschooling around 8 o'clock, 8:30, and while they're eating, I'm like playing some upbeat music just to set the tone for the day. Or maybe if we're cleaning up our home, many times I'll just play some really, really good music, some uplifting music, just to improve the mood, to regulate my environment, if you will. So, having that awareness and understanding what improves your mood. In the world of life coaching, we refer to this as pleasure stacking. So, think about your most daunting task or chore that you have to do for the day. For some of you, it may be laundry. For others, it may be washing the dishes. It may be even cold calling your prospects in your business, whatever it is, something that you feel is just mundane or monotonous or daunting or arduous, whatever. Now, when it comes to pleasure stacking, on a 1 to 10 scale, how pleasurable it is, chances are you may be even in the negative. You're like, Josh, this is a -2 experience on the pleasure scale. So, when you think of what can get it closer to a 10, there are most certainly ways you can amplify the experience and make it more pleasurable by stacking things that you love. So, for example, if I am washing the dishes, I have a dishwasher. Fortunately, I do. But sometimes you also have to wash dishes if you have a whole lot. So, what I'll do is I'll listen to an audio, I'll listen to some personal development. I may drink some wine, I may listen to some music, but something that I can do to make it more pleasurable. Now, for those of you who probably find exercising a little bit daunting, find ways to make it fun. Maybe you might love doing Zumba class. Maybe you dressing up. Ladies, you may find yourself a really sexy, cute outfit that you go to the gym with, and it makes you feel more confident. If that's the case, maybe that's a way that you can self-regulate when it comes to just how you feel for that specific moment. But always look for ways you can get your experience closer to a 10. So if you absolutely dread sitting in traffic, but you love listening to personal development, you love jumping onto the Breakfast Club, this is one of the ways you can self regulate your Tuesday mornings. Always look for ways to pleasure stack whatever experience you're encountering. Okay. So this is super valuable. Anything that you have as a task for the day, whichever one is not 7 and above on the pleasure scale, find ways that you can reinforce it with pleasurable things that you can amplify the overall experience from a pleasure standpoint. Number 3 is self motivation. Self motivation. This is one of the most challenging parts of entrepreneurship, I would say, especially. But even for some of you who want to get back in shape, you may really want to get back in shape. You may want to improve your life, but you just can't seem to find the motivation. And self motivation in itself is a skill. I believe it's knowledge, but it's also the application of the knowledge, the skills that you need to be able to um, better take control of your self motivation. And the more you understand it, the more empowered you're going to be. Because again, you put the ball in your hands and you take control over the way that you feel at any given moment. So, discovering your why and aligning with your purpose, which includes honoring and respecting others. Having a very compelling why is always going to help when it comes to your self motivation. Why do you do what it is that you do? What gives you that motivation throughout the course of the day? What makes you just go hard in the paint, as we oftentimes say in the world of sports? And when it comes to your self motivation, remember, what motivates you may not very well be what motivates someone else. So don't just push your ways of self motivation on other people. Find out what works for you. That's why it's so important to and just see the entire buffet of what's available to you in the world of personal development and just utilize what sticks. Some things will work for a season, others don't. So, for example, we do these quarterly 21 days to transformation challenges in our community. It's just our way of keeping on track. Some of you probably did it once this year, some of you maybe twice or three times this year. Some of you probably downloaded the Productive app. Remember, those of you who were on the Breakfast Club at the beginning of the year, I recommended the Productive app. Guess what? I am not using the Productive app right now, but it served its purpose for that season. So explore all of your options, see what works, and just know that sometimes you may have something that's working for you now, and then 2 months down the road, it's something completely different. But a why, it sticks a lot longer. You have to know why you're doing what it is that you're doing. And I love the saying that why is an acronym for what hurts you. So sometimes it's not the fluffy, flowery stuff. It is the things that stir you up emotionally. Perhaps what hurts you is the idea that you're working somewhere that just sucks all of your motivation. It doesn't feel like you're doing work that you're passionate about. Perhaps what hurts you is your inability to spend more time with your kids or with your spouse. Perhaps what hurts you is just you constantly living paycheck to paycheck where there's more month at the end of the money. And perhaps that can be a compelling why, and that'll drive you. But that may also very well be seasonal because once you liberate yourself from that situation, so for example, for me, I remember my biggest why was retiring from the workforce. When I was 24, I did not want to work my career for the rest of my life. And there were people in my business that were thriving and succeeding. And I just had this Me Too mentality where if they could do it, I can do it. And I was so adamant about retiring from the workforce. And I did at 24. But again, that why didn't stick because once I liberated myself from that, then it was on to the next why. And the next why was just being significant and making a difference in the world and to help alleviate people from suffering, to help them heal and transform and improve their lives. So again, you have to know exactly why you're doing what it is that you're doing. And perhaps if you haven't discovered it, maybe you just haven't really taken the time to do that self-reflection, to think about what it is that you want. I love the Ikigai framework, which I oftentimes share here on the Breakfast Club. And it's a Japanese model for discovering your purpose. So you can actually look it up, go on Google and type in Ikigai. And I believe the meaning or the definition of Ikigai is a purpose for living, right? Or a meaning for living. And you can discover through that framework, there's actually like a model that they have there that helps you identify what you are here to do. Okay. So self-motivation, absolutely important. So number four is empathy. Empathy. Now, I had heard yesterday as I was doing some more research on emotional intelligence that when it comes to psychopaths, people who are psychopaths, they some of them actually have many of these emotional intelligence skills, but the part of their brain that there's a deficiency is the part of the brain that's responsible for empathy. So they may very well know how to effectively communicate. Some of them may very well have social skills. Some of them may have self motivation or regulation, right? But they don't have the empathy. And this is where a lot of leaders struggle, unfortunately. They don't have the awareness of other people's emotions and the way people are feeling, their team. It's so important to just be able to empathize with people. And I can tell you right now, throughout my journey of leading organizations of tens of thousands of people, when I started to understand that you have to be able to go deep with your people. You have to be able to wear your heart on your sleeve and get vulnerable and to be able to empathize with people. And there's a big difference between empathy and sympathy. We're not talking about just always sympathizing with something that people are going through, but sometimes it's important to just acknowledge people and what they're going through. And this will most certainly grow trust in your organization. It will have people typically want to follow you and to work with you because you understand what they're going through, and people just want to feel seen. People want to just be heard. People want to be heard and they want to be seen. And going back to the idea of childhood trauma, if you guys remember last week, most of what our problems most of our problems in life are derived from not feeling like we're enough. And a lot of that, specifically, this feeling of not feeling like you're enough, is directly rooted in possibly some childhood trauma. And we're not always talking about that capital T trauma, like something catastrophic happening or something devastating. We're talking about the little t trauma, the things that are very subtle, like perhaps your parents ignoring you and you just desperately wanted their attention. Maybe it was some bullying that you encountered as a 9-year-old kid in elementary school. But there are certain things that created sort of this little t trauma, as it's oftentimes referred to, that show up later on in life and manifests itself as just feeling like you're not enough. So give people the gift of your attention. Gift your followers or your teammates or the people that you are leading. Give them the gift of your presence. Give them the gift of, again, your attention and your focus. And this is ultimately what will have people want to be partnered up with you. So empathy is understanding other people's emotional makeup and placing high value on the feelings of others. Emotions matter. Oftentimes what I do is whenever I'm meeting with someone, I'll oftentimes just ask them how they're feeling. How they're feeling. Think about the last time someone has asked you, how are you feeling today? Think about that. You know how many people live lives of quiet desperation? I would say the vast majority of people in the world today live lives of quiet desperation. When was the last time, as a leader, you asked, or as a teammate, you've asked one of your teammates or one of the people that you lead, how are they feeling today? How about this? When was the last time you were asked? For those of you in relationships, man, this is so important. If you're in a relationship, ask your partner, how was their day? How are they feeling? And I've been guilty of this over the years, just not having the awareness. Hey, feelings matter. It's important. There's all this talk about, oh, we live in a soft generation. And it's like, there may be some truth to that, but you know what's also true? It's more awareness around feelings more than ever before. There's more of an awareness around childhood trauma. This is why the idea or the people who advocate for bullying in school, why are they advocating? Because there's so much more data and information out there on the effects of childhood trauma on the brain. There's so much data on emotional intelligence. So it's not completely that the world is becoming softer, even though I agree with that to a certain extent. But I also feel that the world is just becoming more aware. And it's like, yeah, for example, like the participation trophy. This is like a big debate. And I've even mentioned my sentiments on this on the Breakfast Club, right? And yes, like you should encourage your child to compete and to go out there. But these are just a lot of parents that are concerned for their child's brain development. These are a lot of parents that are worried about their children not feeling like they're enough later on in life. So you can't be quick to just judge the people who are advocates for participation trophies. They are concerned about their children. And for those of you who don't have children, you probably haven't really developed that instinct, right? That parent instinct that is cultivated when you have children and you're heavily involved with your children. And I most certainly I get fearful when it comes to just my children's safety and maybe certain things that may potentially affect them down the road. And it's so important for me to teach my children about this emotional intelligence and having self-esteem, right? And to also have that competitive spirit as well. I think it is important for kids to want to go for first place. It's absolutely important. But you know what's also important? Teaching them the importance of learning and growing and having fun, just having fun overall. Yes, let the kids compete and be the best that they could possibly be, but also let the kids know that, hey, it's not always just about the first place, because think about it, every single time they don't get first place, they're going to feel miserable. So it's essential to teach those children, hey, have fun. Go out there, do your best. You always want to shoot for first place. You always want to be the best that you could possibly be. But when it's all said and done, the most important thing is you're out there and you're having fun, you're having a good time, you're learning, you're growing, and you're striving to be the best version of you, to do the best that you can. Okay? So last but not least, we have social skills. This is number 5. Social skills. So building rapport, respect, and mutual admiration to create a cohesive team that moves in the desired direction is so important. So having that rapport, having that respect, mutual admiration, and that's what it's about. That social swag, as I oftentimes refer to it. And you'd be amazed by how many people have not developed that social swagger. And this is one of the most important things you can do when it comes to being a leader. You've got to have social skills. And I loved going over the personality types. So there's 4 predominant personality types, or 4 archetypes, if you will, of people in the world. And in the world of personal development, sometimes you'll hear of them referred to either as an archetype or as a color. So, for example, we have the red, blues, greens, and yellows. These colors represent the 4 different personality types. So you have people who are red personality types that are driven, motivated. These are the alpha type A personality types. Then you have, let's just say, the blue personality types, which are more about fun. And these people are the life of the party. Maybe they're not the best with time, and they have the funky look going on, right? With the big earrings and the big hair, and they're loud, and you have those fun-loving people. And then you have the yellow personality types, which are the kumbaya, the tree-hugging people, the people who are very warm and affectionate and loving. And then you have the green personality types, which are super logical, analytical people, detail-oriented, always on time. I tend to be on the green red spectrum. So you may very well have a little bit of all the colors. But you may also have 2 predominant colors that are of your makeup. So throughout humanity, people are either one of 4 of these or just a combination of them. And it's so important to understand that, because if you are a red personality type, let's say very hard charging and driven, you can't always articulate your message in that way or express yourself in that way to someone, let's say, who's a yellow, softer person, or someone who's more on the compassionate, loving side, because they may be a little bit more sensitive. And people are just wired differently. So it's so important to cultivate the social skills that can cater to every personality type. So, for example, I am a very green personality type as well. As you all know, I mean, as you can see, it's very rare to start the Breakfast Club super late. It's typically started on time. If it's not for whatever reason, it's just due to circumstances outside of my control. But I also, if you notice, I am very like detail oriented sometimes, and I'll go over facts and figures and analytical stuff, and I geek out about these things. I love learning, love sharing information. So that green personality type it resonates for greens. A lot of greens like that messaging, whereas a blue personality type who's, fun going, and sometimes blues are like the squirrel people. They see something it's like squirrel, right? And they get easily distracted, and they may not necessarily resonate with my messaging here. They may tune out because it's just too many facts and figures or information. So again, you want to be able to cater to every personality type, and this is what develops social skills. So, just to do a quick recap for those of you who jumped on a little bit late, here are the 5 emotional intelligence mastery skills. Number 1 is self awareness. Number 2 is self regulation. Number 3 is self motivation. Number 4 is empathy. Number 5 is social skills. Thanks again for tuning into this episode. It would mean the world to me if you can follow, subscribe, share, or even leave a review. I look forward to putting out more content, and we'll see you on another episode.